Welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, folks, welcome back to Dominant Mets Nation. Thank you all for returning, and I am excited for what is about to happen. I'll tell you that. David Stearns and the New York Mets are gearing up for a very, I would say, active offseason. It looks like if you read the tea leaves in MLB, a lot of things look like they're on the table. You hear rumors, big name players on the block. I mean, like big name players. Corey Seager, Ketel Marte. I heard Mike Trout the other day. I have a comment about that later on in this video that relates to the New York Mets. So please stay tuned for that. Um, but before we begin, I just got to say the story that came out in the last couple of days about former New York Met Adam Ottavino and his comments about the Mets are just insane. Just insane. Do they have any truth? Or is it just a former disgruntled employee really venting? I mean, because folks, you don't often hear players, former players, current players say what Adam Ottavino said about the New York Mets and Carlos Mendoza specifically. I mean, is it something really to be concerned about? He also made a comment about David Stearns that he's not the best communicator, but I'll say most of the comments strewed by Adam Ottavino were a bit negative to say the least. So let me know what you think. What's your commentary on this issue? We're going to go through it. Then I got some comments about the Mets landscape and what the Mets options kind of are. Okay. So again, subscribe, big Mets fan, MLB fan. We'd love you to be a part of the Dominant Mets Nation channel. Again, I enjoy this so much. I enjoy you. You're the reason why I do this. And again, thank you in advance. All right. So Adam Ottavino, he's been a little, a chirpy bird lately, like pretty vocal and again, not saying nice things, not saying nice things about Carlos Mendoza, basically calling Carlos Mendoza in, so many words, incompetent when it comes to the bullpen. Now, the story about Adam Adavino is he went scorched earth on Carlos Mendoza about the Mets bullpen strategy and basically saying, they are in a lot of trouble if the Mets continue to go down this road. Adam Ottavino specifically said the Mets handling of their pitchers last season was, horrendous. Carlos Mendoza does not know what he's doing. And the specific words of Adam Ottavino said, this is embarrassing. This is actually pathetic. Like pathetic. I would never let this happen if I was on the team. He said, at least half of these guys would have been blown out. I would have protected these dudes myself. I would have had to jump in front of them myself. And, kind of ironic, captain or, heroic Adam Ottavino, you criticize Carlos Mendoza. So he literally knocks Carlos Mendoza to the side, says a lot, a bunch of negative things about him, but in the same sentence props himself up. The hero, Adam Ottavino. If he was there, this would have never happened. And just by comparison, the Mets went through 37 pitchers in 2024, and in 2025, they went through 50. But you know what the thing is? The Mets, if you looked at the starting rotation in the beginning of the year, the Mets starting rotation had a lot of question marks, a lot of holes. Kodai Senga injured the year before when Adam Ottavino was there, only threw 5 innings. Sean Manaea came in, started the year with concerns. Holmes was a converted bullpen guy. David Peterson had limited innings, and Frankie Montas was a huge question mark. So right off the back, the base, the foundation of the pitching situation was questionable. So that instead of saying Carlos Mendoza, you screwed it up. I mean, the foundation set up by David Stearns was the issue, was a big issue. Yes, Carlos Mendoza made a bunch of mistakes, but I'm not really To me, it sounds more like sour grapes, more like sour grapes. So that really caused me to kind of examine, really Adam Ottavino and how he really left the New York Mets. We know Adam Ottavino had a great season in 2022, pitched to that 2.06 ERA. 2023, not a bad season as well. But in 2024, Adam Ottavino, he had a chance to opt out of his contract with the Mets to see if he can get more money. So to see if he can get more money, like the deal originally was with the Mets that Adavino was supposed to have a player option and get $6.75 million from the Mets in 2024. However, he turned that deal down. He went out on the open market and he tried to garner a longer contract, maybe multiple years. Could not get anything that he was looking for. So he went back to the Mets, and instead of getting that $6.75 million deal, he ended up getting a deal of $4.5 million. So on the surface, it looks like, hey, you know what? He should have got that 6.75. He's down $2 million. Well, yes, that's true. But, to be fair, the money was deferred. The money was deferred on the initial contract. So on the original contract, he was going to be getting $6.75 million, but $4 million was going to be deferred from 2032 to 2035. So the present day value of that was that he would only get $2.25 million. So, he did get more present day money. I mean, the total value of the contract, yes, was a couple $1,000,000 less. So, at the end of the day, I think Adam Ottavino really didn't get everything he wanted in that 2024, but whatever. It is what it is. But if you really look at it, that 2024 season, Adam Ottavino got hit hard. He didn't have a great season at all. It was really kind of like a terrible year if you really remember. He had a 4.34 ERA. People were kind of calling to cut or release Adam Ottavino well before the season ended. And then, they were in the playoffs. They left them off I believe, the NLCS roster. So, there were just a lot of sour grapes. The Mets never tendered him a contract for 2025. So, I don't think he left the Mets on very, very good terms. So, there were a lot of sour grapes there. But, the comments, about the Mets and Carlos Mendoza being pathetic, again, it really kind of seemed personal. And then he goes on to say, unfortunately, there was nobody willing to stand up and talk to Carlos Mendoza this year. It was just me, I guess. So a little bit of an issue there. So again, he just refers back to, hey, in 2025, none of the Mets pitchers was strong enough and to talk to Carlos Mendoza. I'm not sure if he knows that specifically. Maybe he has a couple buddies in the team. But again, he's patting himself on the back. Like, in 2024, I was the only one to stand up. In 2025, none of those professional men were strong enough. Here's where I just have a little struggling. You could say, if you're not, if you're upset with Carlos Mendoza, you could say, yeah, look, there's proof. But Adam Ottavino wasn't in the room in 2025. And again, you're really not giving any credit to any of the Mets pitchers. You're really not. You're not giving any credit to, any of the coaching staff. You're not giving credit to any of the veterans. The only person in the world was Adam Ottavino. He was the only one who would stand up and inform Carlos Mendoza. So again, there's just so much of Adam Ottavino patting himself on the back. It's just really comical at this point. It doesn't seem realistic when a guy continues to prop himself up. Enough with the ego. And again, he continued in his article or when he was on his podcast show, if they continue to go down this road, they're really going to be screwed, because if you cannot injure this many dudes every year Hopefully, this is not an actual strategy because it's freaking pathetic. It's not player friendly, and eventually people will catch on. And it's funny because they were bragging about keeping people healthy the year before when it had nothing to do with them. So, yeah, I'm a little annoyed because these are guys that should be playing. So it pisses me off. I mean, like, so again, he's from his actual lips. He says he's annoyed. He says it pisses him off. But again, I don't think the reasons he's saying are making him mad. I think it's the relationship and how it ended and how they treated him. And maybe they didn't respect him as much as he thought he should have been respected. But at the end of the day, it's just a former employee, former disgruntled employee to say the least. And it just really doesn't rub me the right way. And then he made comments about Nimmo and how Nimmo was frustrated with Andy Martino because Andy Martino had an old New York team and he put Verdugo in front of him in left field a few years ago, and he said that Nimmo confronted Martino. But we know Brandon Nimmo, he's not a confrontational guy. Yes, according to Martino, they had a conversation, but I mean, Adavino made it seem like like Nimmo was out for blood. And also, he also made comments alluding to Nimmo not being happy about Lindor, the Lindor captain conversation. So at the end of the day, how do you feel about this? I just feel it's just one former employee just trying to cause trouble. You're almost a troublemaker. So I mean, we're in the offseason. None of the big fish have signed yet. But again, another gripe that I have with Adam Ottavino is where were these comments in the season? And I mean, I know you had a contract with the Yankees, but still open up your mouth. Open up your mouth. There's just so much. It's so self-serving, and now maybe it's an opportunity for him to, get attention. Too self-serving. The hero, I'm the only guy to stand up. Everybody looks bad except for Adam Ottavino. David Stearns is not the best communicator. Carlos Mendoza, screwed up the bullpen, the way he manages the pitchers. Nobody knows how to do things right except for Adam Ottavino. Wow, we should all be like Adam Ottavino. But I'll tell you this, folks. MLB right now is in a very interesting position with the lockout coming. And, you're hearing a lot of different rumors. I think it was John Harper had a rumor out there that Corey Seager might be an option. Mets, Yankees, Ketel Marte a couple days ago, you heard he may be an option. These guys, you notice Corey Seager, he's got 4 or 5 years remaining on the contract until he's 37. He's making a lot of money. Ketel Marte's got a contract going up until 2030, an option for 2031. You heard the other day, and I wanted to bring this to your attention. I'm pretty sure some of you have already heard of it. If you hadn't got a chance to like the video, now's another good chance. Subscribe to if you like to subscribe. But when I was listening to Evan Roberts, love Evan Roberts, he was talking about how an inside source texted him that the New York Mets were supposedly very interested in talks with the Angels regarding a possible huge move, meaning the Mets getting Mike Trout and the Angels getting Brandon Nimmo. So, I mean, when I heard that, like, automatically, I'm like, okay, really, like, and I would have thought that I would never really think like this, but, I'm like, Mike Trout is really done right now. I mean, the contract is same length as Nimmo, same length. I believe they're both signed for 5 more years. But Trout is making so much more money. He's making 37 mil a year, and Nimmo is making 20 mil a year. Trout is often injured. He's a year older. So I mean, when you hear that a guy like David Stearns wants to get younger. He wants to get faster. He wants to be more athletic. It's all about defense. And then, in the beginning of the year, beginning of the offseason, Brandon Nimmo's on the trade block. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense because, the philosophy of Stearns, saving runs, Brandon Nimmo's getting older. Okay, his defensive prowess isn't there. He's got no arm. But trading for a guy that's been often injured and that's making twice the money, you're talking about eliminating risk. That would be taking on so much more risk. It doesn't really make sense. And then you see the way Major League Baseball is going. And I kind of when I heard Brandon Nimmo on the block, I'm like, he's still a productive player. Brandon Nimmo had a very great season last year. Um, and I'm like, okay, he's gonna be 33. He's got 5 years left on the contract. He's coming off of a year where he had 25 home runs, 92 RBIs, batted 262. Very good, very good. And then, all right, let's trade him. Well, you know what? I think that, baseball right now, especially with the potential lockout next year, I think there comes a point where guys just all of a sudden, are going to lose. Really, their value could take a tremendous dive. Right now, Brandon Nimmo just played his age 32 season, and maybe if you could trade him before he takes that steep decline where you can get possibly rid of the 20 million and you could possibly get something back of value. That would be good because you eliminate the risk of carrying a long-term contract and him all of a sudden getting old, all of a sudden him can't playing defense, and all of a sudden, you have the offensive numbers pretty respectable. All of a sudden, if those offensive numbers take a dip, let's say next year, he's hurt, he goes 15, maybe 50 RBIs, 15 home runs, 50 RBIs, plays half the season, his value is garbage, is done. Then he's got 4 years left. 4 years left, $80 million. You're stuck with him. Right now, you trade this guy, you trade these guys, even though they still have value, while they still have value, and it's interesting. But for the Mike Trout situation, I think that's really a non-starter. Unfortunately, it's really a non-starter with the team philosophy in terms of eliminating risk. That's not where I want to allocate my money. It's really not. I mean, Mike Trout, he's a Hall of Famer. He's had a really great career, but it's about getting younger, faster, more talented elsewhere. And a guy like Mike Trout, unless the salary is going to be paid, which that's not going to be the case, I don't think trading Brandon Nimmo in that direction makes any sense. You also heard Brandon Nimmo going to other locations. I'm okay with trading Brandon Nimmo for the right situation, but that situation makes zero sense. But I'll tell you this: what that situation does show you in a big way is that the Mets are open to anything, right? And in terms of them having an appetite for change, an appetite for risk, that shows you that they have a willingness and an appetite to do anything, and that they are ready and willing to really change the core of this team, change the look, change everything about this team. Last year, quite frankly, it was not good enough. I mean, like, think about this. I said this in my last video. Even if the Mets, status quo, you get Diaz, you get Alonso, right? And you don't really make any other changes. We're just an 83 win team. We're just an 83 win team at status quo. So the Mets need to shake things up. If that means trading Nimmo, McNeil, trading that core away, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it'll also open up avenues and holes for the younger kids. And, it'll open up a whole different, options for David Stearns to put his imprint on this team. He's going into his third year now. He showed in willingness to take some risk at the trade deadline. And, at the trade deadline, I wasn't happy at all because of the fact that we got nothing back at the time that really elevated our team, elevated our talent. And yes, Ryan Helsley is supposed to be a talented guy. He didn't produce. But now, as I look back at it, you traded a bunch of guys away who had just, they were prospects, but their prospect value was diminishing quickly, like Drew Gilbert, Blade Tidwell, and a lot of the guys that they traded, all their value was diminishing. Like if you had Blade Tidwell right now, would he even be a top 25 prospect in the Mets farm? The Mets farm being so deep. Very interesting. So before these guys like really went down, you saw David Stearns become very, very, very aggressive. So again, I will continue to expect Stearns in this offseason to be very aggressive. I expect two top flight arms. Tariq Scubo. Now you're hearing from some MLB insiders that Detroit has not made him available. But I think that is more or less a cat and mouse game. If Detroit wants to increase his value, they're going to say, no, we don't want to trade him. They're not going to advertise wanting to trade him. They might be, at least not to other teams. Yes, they will engage in conversations, but like for you to get the most value, you're going to say to the suitors, no, we want him. You're going to have to blow us away. So, of course, that's the rhetoric you're hearing. Now, it's the same thing with David Stearns in his comments about Carson Bench. Carson Bench, I remember a couple weeks ago, the thought was that he was going to possibly come at one point, but Stearns said, most recently that no, Carson Bench could be a viable center field option to start, and we may not need a center field option. I don't buy that at all. A team that values themselves or views themselves as a World Series contender to start off the 2026 season after a very, very unsuccessful prior year, Carson Bench, as good as he's been, and honestly, he has been great. Teams that didn't draft him are kicking themselves right now, but he has not had that much success at the next level. AAA, 178 batting average through 100 plate appearances, a little more than 100 plate appearances. So, you're going to want to see him succeed at that level before you talk about him being your starting center fielder in 2026. I mean, could he possibly blow it out in spring training? Yes, but again, we're talking about a $300 million team, a team that aspires to be a World Series championship. You're going to want a little more assurance, a little more, somebody who's proven out there. Now, so as I mentioned before, so there's a lot of rumors that teams are willing to trade some of their high-priced players, talented players that have long contracts. Corey Seager, Ketel Marte, Brandon Nimmo, all these guys are supposedly on the block. I mean, what does that also mean? What does that say about, next year's potential lockout and or potential, renegotiation? Do we see like a salary cap, and do players that have all these contracts long term, like how will that be affected? Yeah, like will these long-term contracts, will they be grandfathered in, or will you be penalized for having all these contracts that take you over the new, cap numbers? Who the heck knows? But teams right now look like they're operating a bit differently. Other teams look like they're going to be more aggressive. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have a very, very interesting offseason to say the least. I'm still very confident that if the Mets want a said player, they have the richest owner in baseball, that the Mets will pursue said player. Now, the roster payroll wise, I saw a couple of writers insist that the New York Mets would have to trade away money first before acquiring new contracts. That's why you hear possibly trading away Brandon Nimmo, possibly trading away McNeil. Those two contracts combined. Let's say the Mets take on no salary, so they trade him for prospects. That would grid about $35 million. Right now, I think the Mets are around $250 million on the payroll, and that is without signing Pete Alonso and without signing Edwin Diaz. So, let's just say you sign Diaz for 20 and Alonso for 30, that takes you right to the $300 million number. But if you trade away Nimmo, you trade away McNeil, you maneuver other pieces of the roster, then you would have more flexibility in terms of not going over the third luxury tax. So those are some of the rumors going on. But at the end of the day, I think Steve Cohen and the Mets are going to operate like they've been operating. If it's something that significantly impacts the team in a positive way and improves their chances of being that World Series contender or winning the World Series, I don't think Steve Cohen is going to hesitate to okay those type of moves. Also, and also too, as I analyze the free agent market when it comes to first base and options that are different than Pete Alonso, it just seems like the backup options aren't that great. Now, I'm one that believes that there is a view, there is a road that we can go down that the Mets can survive without Pete and be productive. But I just don't want to overlook how great Pete has been, how much he has produced, what type of protection that he provided Juan Soto. Juan Soto placed number 3 in the MVP, had phenomenal numbers, and who protected Soto? Pete Alonso provided great protection. Pete also improved as an overall hitter, hitting his highest career batting average. So I just want to remember, if we're going to let go of Pete, just remember what is the replacement. Ryan Clifford. Ryan Clifford might be 2 years away from being, or 3 years away from being at the level we need him to be in terms of him being a competitive player. I mean, if he, somehow came up next year and he was at the level, an all-star level, I mean, that'd be amazing, but how likely is that? Not very likely. So, the Mets are, again, we have a lot of questions to answer. Mauricio, Beatty, Acuna, we got a logjam in the middle of the infield. Jet Williams, what are these guys going to be used as trade chips? Brett Beatty, is he going to be with the New York Mets? I mean, I would like to see that. I saw a really turn and shift in Brett Beatty, especially with his swing. I'm excited about him. But again, a guy like Brett Beatty probably holds the most value because of what teams saw from him, his positional versatility. But again, I really think Stearns is going to stay true to what he said in his end of the season press conference. Run prevention, run prevention, run prevention. And that leads me to Bellinger being a guy that really fits the mold. He fits the criteria that the New York Mets are looking for. But again, how long is that contract going to be, and how much is Scott Boras and Bellinger going to really be looking for? But that guy really fits the mold. And it just really, one more note: the Yankees signed Grisham, not signed Grisham. They extended him the qualifying offer, and they assume, I gotta believe, everybody's saying they believe that he was going to turn down the qualifying offer and look for a more long-term contract, 3-4 years, maybe 60 plus million. And that means whatever team signed Grisham would have to surrender a draft pick to the Yankees, so the Yankees would recoup a draft pick. Now, didn't turn out that way. Grisham decided to opt in, take the qualifying offer. He's going to be paid $22.5 million. So now the Yankees payroll is around $280-something million just at the start of free agency. So they don't have that much wiggle room, which does that take them out of the Cody Bellinger sweepstakes? I don't think so. But, again, the Yankees are going to have a lot to do. But I really got to think this. And let me know what you think. This might be a little bit of, I know Yankee fans would be very tweaked by this. I was thinking about doing a video on this particularly, but I'm like, all right, let me pose it to you. Does Steve Cohen's presence and does what the Mets did to the Yankees last year really affected the way the New York Yankees approach Trent Grisham? Meaning, the Yankees really wanted to guarantee that they had a center fielder, or they had a very legit outfielder, at least a legit outfielder in Grisham as insurance. as insurance, right? Because right now, I mean, paying this guy $22.5 million. I mean, he had a great season last year, but he's like a career under 200 hitter. Career under 200 hitter. His bat speed is very, very poor. 71 bat speed. And I think it was a little up this year, but his bat speed is almost not even major leagues. So that is, and his defensive skills have gone down. He's just not a guy that you would pay $22 million on the open market. So did the threat of the Mets stealing Bellinger, just like they kind of stole Juan Soto, caused the Yankees to really not think right, really not think correctly about this, and they really went overboard to assure themselves that they would have an option. Yeah, it just seems a little peculiar because now the Yankees find themselves in a very, very unfavorable salary situation. Was it because of Steve Cohen and the threat of them being left in the dark? I mean, if you really think about it, the center field situation, you got Bader, you got Mullins, but there's really not too many options. Luis Robert Jr., are they going to try to, swing a trade for him? That would cost them prospects and capital. I think the Yankees would probably be, willing, more willing to make a trade for somebody else who's not as shaky, not as streaky or injury prone. But all right, folks, let me know what you think. We're going to be wrapping this down. Like, subscribe. I'm anticipating big things happening. The last thing I saw is that the Mets, they did have some. Yeah, there was some news. Center fielder Tyrone Taylor and the New York Mets agreed on Friday to a $3.8 million 1 year contract. They avoided salary arbitration. New York also chose not to offer contracts to three relief pitchers, Max Kranick, Jose Castillo, and Danny Young. All three became free agents ahead of Friday's non-tender deadline. The speedy Tyrone Taylor has spent the last 2 seasons with the Mets. So, I mean, honestly, I got to say, I was just talking about how center fielders are kind of are very, very tough to find a very good center fielder. And, a guy like Tyrone Taylor, who has great defensive skills, gold glove caliber center fielder in my mind. Great arm, great range. That's a good move, a very solid move. He's been fairly healthy. He's a great guy. I think a great fourth outfielder. When he's plays every single day, we saw him get exposed. But on the defensive side, and he's just very, very good. Very, very good. So I'm very happy that we secured him that center field option. Very, very happy, especially with Juan Soto in right and with the uncertainty with Brandon Nimmo defensively. You at least have that defensive talent secure. So great job, great job, great job. I mean, the next couple of years, we're going to see how the outfield is probably going to change with Carson Benches of the world, AJ Ewing. But, you got a 1 year contract, not too much downside there. All right, folks. So, again, that was the latest news. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the Adam Ottavino. Those comments, I might be completely wrong. He may be speaking from a position of expertise, but again, if I just would have liked this stuff to come out a lot earlier if stuff was truly askew and if he really certainly cared about the players. At the end of the day, it just really seemed like he cared more about his feelings and himself, which again, you human beings, that's natural, that's normal. But come on, sour grapes, this is not normal. This is really not normal. And obviously his baseball career is over, so yeah, let's make these comments, loud comments, and get the attention on himself. But whatever. Very self-serving in my opinion. So again, like and subscribe. Thank you for sticking with us. I really do appreciate that. Have a great day, folks. Thank you so much.